The moment you decide who someone is before the facts arrive, you stop enforcing the law and start chasing your own assumptions. The flashing blue lights reflected across the quiet Kentucky highway just outside the entrance to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as Officer Ryan Carter stepped out of his patrol cruiser on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. Less than 40 feet ahead, a dark gray sedan sat calmly on the shoulder with its engine still running. The driver had already lowered his window and rested both hands comfortably on the steering wheel before Ryan even approached the vehicle. Everything about the scene appeared routine. The weather was clear, traffic flowed steadily toward the installation, and the morning commute continued as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet 39 minutes later, no one at that roadside would remember the traffic stop itself. They would remember the phone call. "Officer Carter," a calm voice echoed across the scene from behind him. "Please turn off your engine. The Pentagon has requested that everyone remain exactly where they are." Ryan slowly turned toward the unfamiliar voice. Several Air Force Security Forces vehicles had surrounded the area without lights or sirens, their arrival so controlled that passing drivers barely noticed anything different. A senior officer stood beside one of the vehicles with a composed expression that revealed nothing. Ryan frowned slightly, his hand still resting on the open driver's door of his cruiser. "The Pentagon?" he repeated, unable to hide the surprise in his voice. "Yes, officer," the senior officer answered evenly. "Please remain where you are. Everything will be explained shortly." Ryan looked toward the quiet man standing beside the gray sedan. The driver had not spoken. He simply waited with remarkable patience, his leather briefcase resting against the passenger door, while the morning breeze gently moved the edge of his navy suit jacket. There was no frustration on his face, no anger, no attempt to demand answers. It almost seemed as though he had expected every minute of what was unfolding. Ryan searched the faces around him, hoping someone would explain why the Pentagon had suddenly become involved in what had begun as a simple traffic stop. No explanation came. The only sounds were passing vehicles, distant aircraft climbing into the morning sky, and the faint crackle of radios exchanging information that Ryan could not hear. Then the story returned to where it had truly begun. 39 minutes earlier, Officer Ryan Carter had been monitoring traffic less than half a mile from the main entrance to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Morning traffic usually followed a predictable rhythm. Civilian employees, contractors, military personnel, and delivery vehicles all merged toward the security gates in an orderly stream. Ryan had worked this assignment for nearly 4 years. Experience had taught him that routine often revealed the smallest violations before they became larger problems. When the dark gray sedan passed his location, something immediately caught his attention. The vehicle drifted slightly over the center line before correcting itself and continued several miles per hour below the posted speed limit. Ryan activated his emergency lights, expecting nothing more than another ordinary stop before lunch. The sedan responded immediately, signaling and pulling safely onto the shoulder without hesitation. As Ryan approached, he noticed the driver was an older black man, probably in his late 50s, wearing a neatly tailored Navy business suit instead of a military uniform. A polished black briefcase rested on the rear seat beside several neatly organized folders. The driver looked composed, meeting Ryan's eyes with quiet confidence instead of nervousness. "Good morning, officer," the man said politely. "How may I help you today?" Ryan introduced himself, explained the reason for the stop, and requested a driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. The man complied immediately before adding one simple sentence in the same calm voice. "I also have official business on the installation this morning." Ryan accepted the documents, glanced briefly toward the entrance of the Air Force Base, and believed he already understood exactly who he was dealing with. He had no idea that the truth had not even begun to introduce itself. Ryan Carter accepted the driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance before studying them for a few quiet seconds. Everything appeared valid. The address matched the registration, the insurance was current, and nothing immediately suggested the driver had done anything more serious than the minor traffic violation Ryan believed he had observed. Still, the final sentence lingered in his mind. Official business on the installation. Ryan looked back at the man sitting calmly behind the wheel. His navy business suit was neatly pressed. His shoes were polished, and his posture reflected quiet confidence rather than nervousness. He did not resemble someone trying to avoid questions, but neither did he fit the image Ryan had expected when he activated his emergency lights. "What kind of official business?" Ryan asked. The driver answered with the same measured tone. "Military business." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Are you active duty?" The man smiled politely without sounding defensive. "I am traveling under official authorization." Ryan noticed that the answer was technically responsive while revealing very little. "Do you have military identification?" The man nodded once. "Yes, officer." He slowly reached inside his suit jacket, carefully removed a dark leather credential holder, and handed it through the open window. "You may verify everything through the appropriate channels." Ryan opened the credential holder expecting to see an ordinary Department of Defense identification card. Instead, he found a secure credential unlike the ones he usually encountered near the base. The card displayed the Department of the Air Force, but several sections normally visible on standard credentials had been replaced by restricted access markings. There was no obvious unit assignment listed on the front. Ryan looked at it twice before glancing back toward the driver. "This is not a standard identification card." "No," the man answered calmly. "It is not." Ryan waited, expecting an explanation that never came. The driver simply rested his hands comfortably in his lap and looked forward through the windshield, showing no sign of impatience. Passing traffic continued moving toward Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as though nothing unusual was happening along the shoulder. A school bus rolled past in the opposite direction. Several civilian employees entered the installation through the distant security checkpoint. Everything outside the traffic stop remained completely ordinary. Ryan closed the credential holder and spoke a little more firmly. "Sir, I need to know exactly who you are before I can determine what happens next." The man met his eyes without hesitation. "Officer, the credential will identify me once it is verified. I respectfully ask that you use the established verification process." Ryan heard the words but interpreted them differently. To him, it sounded like another person attempting to complicate what should have been a routine stop. During his years on patrol, he had occasionally encountered people who hinted at important positions or government connections, hoping an officer would simply end the encounter without asking further questions. Looking at the quiet black man sitting inside the sedan, Ryan allowed that past experience to shape his judgment before the facts had fully arrived. "Please remain in your vehicle," he said. "I will be back shortly." "Of course, officer," the driver replied. "Take whatever time is necessary." Ryan walked back toward his patrol cruiser carrying the unusual credential holder. Once inside, he placed the documents beside the mobile computer and entered the information exactly as it appeared. Within seconds, the system returned an unexpected message. "Protected Department of the Air Force credential. Local verification unavailable. Contact authorized military liaison." Ryan stared at the screen for a moment before reading the message again. He had never seen that notification during an ordinary traffic stop. Believing it was probably an administrative complication rather than anything significant, he reached for his radio and called dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I need assistance verifying a restricted Department of the Air Force credential. My computer is directing me to an authorized military liaison." A brief pause followed before the dispatcher answered. "Copy, Unit 12. Stand by while we initiate the verification request." Ryan glanced once more through his windshield. The driver remained exactly where he had been from the beginning, sitting quietly inside the gray sedan with the patience of someone who seemed completely confident that the official process would eventually speak louder than any assumption. Dispatch remained silent for nearly 20 seconds before the radio finally came alive again. "Unit 12, we have contacted the Installation Liaison Office. Please stand by. They are reviewing the credential through a secure verification system." Ryan acknowledged the transmission and leaned back in his seat, tapping a pen lightly against the incident notebook resting on the center console. 20 seconds had already become almost a full minute, and the verification had not produced a simple answer. That alone felt unusual. Through the windshield, he watched the dark gray sedan remain motionless on the shoulder. The older black man had not stepped out of the vehicle or attempted to draw attention to himself. Instead, he calmly reviewed a folder from his leather briefcase before closing it again and returning both hands to the steering wheel. There was something remarkably disciplined about every movement he made. Nothing appeared rushed. Nothing suggested frustration. It was as though waiting had become part of his daily routine. Ryan stepped back out of his cruiser and approached the driver's window once again. "The verification is taking longer than expected," he explained. "I appreciate your patience." The driver offered a courteous nod. "Some credentials require additional coordination." Ryan studied him carefully. "You seem to expect that." "I expected the process to work exactly as it was designed." Ryan folded his arms. "You still have not told me exactly who you are." The man smiled politely. "Officer, the verification will answer that question more accurately than I can." Ryan noticed the answer never challenged his authority, yet it also never revealed anything beyond what was necessary. It was the kind of response given by someone who had spent years working within organizations where procedure mattered more than personalities. Before Ryan could continue, his portable radio sounded again. "Unit 12, the installation liaison has confirmed that the credential is authentic but cannot complete verification at their level. They are forwarding the request to a higher Air Force Command authority. Please remain on scene." Ryan frowned. "Higher Command Authority?" "Affirmative. They advised that additional authorization is required before releasing identifying information." Ryan thanked dispatch and returned the radio to his shoulder. That response made even less sense than the first notification. Normally, military identification could be confirmed within minutes through established channels. This time, every answer seemed to generate another level of review. Ryan walked back toward his cruiser, entering additional notes into the incident report, while the mobile computer displayed a new system notification. Verification request escalated. Restricted access credential. Await higher authorization. No further local action authorized. He read the message twice before glancing toward the entrance of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Morning traffic continued flowing through the security gates without interruption. Air Force personnel in uniform entered the installation beside civilian employees carrying identification badges clipped neatly to their jackets. Nothing about the base appeared unusual. Yet somewhere beyond those gates, multiple offices were now reviewing the identity of one quiet man sitting inside a gray sedan. Unknown to Ryan, the verification request had already traveled far beyond the local installation. Protected information automatically triggered additional safeguards built into the military personnel system, requiring confirmation through increasingly senior channels before any details could be released. The process moved quietly, without urgency or unnecessary conversation, because everyone handling the request understood that protected credentials existed for a reason. Back on the roadside, the driver remained completely composed. Ryan approached one final time. "Sir, I cannot release you until this verification is completed." The man looked up with the same calm confidence he had shown from the beginning. "I understand completely, officer. Important responsibilities deserve accurate records. Please allow the process to finish." Those words lingered in Ryan's mind as he returned to his cruiser once more. A few moments later, another secure notification appeared on his computer screen. This one shorter than the others, but somehow even more significant. Verification transferred beyond installation command. Await further instructions. At almost the exact same moment, hundreds of miles away, another phone began ringing. The secure notification disappeared from Ryan Carter's computer almost as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind nothing except a case number and the instruction to await further guidance. He stared at the screen for several seconds before checking the time. Fewer than 15 minutes had passed since he had activated his emergency lights, yet the routine traffic stop had already moved beyond every procedure he had experienced during nearly 4 years on patrol. His portable radio remained unusually quiet. Even dispatch seemed to be waiting for someone else to make the next decision. Inside the dark gray sedan, The older black man remained exactly as Ryan had first encountered him. His navy suit still looked perfectly pressed despite the warm Kentucky morning, and his leather briefcase rested neatly on the front passenger seat. He neither watched Ryan nor looked impatient. Instead, he quietly reviewed the day's schedule displayed on a small tablet before setting it aside again. There was no sign that he intended to call anyone or explain who he really was. He simply trusted the process to continue unfolding on its own. Nearly 500 miles away, inside a secure administrative office within the Pentagon, an automated personnel verification request reached a protected communications desk. The request itself appeared ordinary until the credential number triggered a restricted access notification requiring immediate confirmation through the Department of the Air Force chain of command. Within moments, the identity associated with the credential had been verified. The confirmation was immediate. The instructions that followed were equally clear. Coordinate directly with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base leadership. Notify local Air Force security forces. Inform the civilian law enforcement chain of command through appropriate channels before releasing the protected traveler. No urgency filled the office because none was necessary. Every person involved simply followed established procedures that had existed for years. Accuracy mattered more than speed. Back outside the installation, Ryan's radio finally broke the silence. Unit 12, stand by for updated instructions. Ryan immediately acknowledged the transmission. Go ahead. The dispatcher spoke carefully, reading from information that had obviously been provided by someone else. Your verification request has been confirmed through higher department of the Air Force Authority. Local installation officials are coordinating with Air Force security forces. Please maintain the current location until they arrive. Ryan leaned slightly forward. Can you identify the individual? A brief pause followed. Negative, Unit 12. That information has not been released to dispatch. We have also been instructed to notify your patrol captain that military representatives are responding. Ryan blinked in surprise. During hundreds of traffic stops over the years, dispatch had never informed his captain simply because an identification card required additional verification. He looked once more toward the gray sedan. The driver had not moved. He had not made a single telephone call. Somehow, the entire response had unfolded without him asking for anything. Ryan stepped out of his cruiser and walked back toward the vehicle. Sir, he said professionally, Air Force representatives are on the way. My dispatcher advised me that your credential has been confirmed through higher command. The man looked up with the same composed expression. Thank you for letting me know. Ryan hesitated before asking another question. Did you expect this level of coordination? The man smiled gently. Officer, responsibilities are different for different people. Procedures exist so that one has to rely on assumptions. Ryan considered the answer as another quiet realization settled into his thoughts. From the beginning of the stop until this very moment, the driver had never once used his position to influence the situation. He had never suggested making a phone call. He had never asked Ryan to contact a superior. Everything had happened because official systems recognized the credential and activated the proper chain of command. Several miles away, 3 Air Force Security Forces vehicles had already departed the installation, while at the same time a separate call was being placed to the patrol captain responsible for supervising Officer Ryan Carter that morning. Ryan Carter lowered his portable radio and looked once more toward the quiet gray sedan parked several yards ahead of his cruiser. Nothing about the scene suggested the level of attention it was suddenly receiving. Morning traffic continued flowing smoothly toward Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Families drove children to school. Contractors entered the installation through the main gate. Delivery trucks followed their scheduled routes. To everyone passing by, it appeared to be another routine traffic stop on an ordinary weekday. Only Ryan knew that somewhere beyond the security fence, people he had never met were now coordinating because of one identification credential resting inside his patrol car. A few moments later, dispatch called again. Unit 12, your patrol captain has been notified and is monitoring the situation. Air Force security forces have acknowledged the request and are responding to your location. Ryan answered immediately. Estimated arrival time? Approximately 5 minutes. Ryan thanked the dispatcher and returned the radio to his shoulder. 5 minutes felt unusually long. He stepped out of the cruiser again, taking a slow look around the quiet roadside. The older black man remained seated inside the sedan with remarkable composure. He was neither checking his watch nor making telephone calls. Instead, he appeared to be reading a printed briefing document before carefully placing it back inside the leather briefcase. Ryan found himself wondering how someone could remain so calm while multiple military offices coordinated around a single traffic stop. He approached the driver's window once more. "Sir, Air Force security forces should be here shortly." The man nodded politely. "Thank you for the update, officer." Ryan hesitated before asking another question. "You seem very confident about how this is unfolding." The man smiled, though not in a way that suggested superiority. "Confidence is easier when everyone follows established procedures." Ryan considered the answer. "Most people become frustrated when verification takes this long." "Most people are concerned about time," the man replied gently. "I am concerned about accuracy." Ryan returned to his cruiser without another word. For the first time since initiating the stop, he began questioning his own assumptions rather than the driver's. Every response the man had given had been respectful. Every instruction had been followed immediately. Every document had been produced without hesitation. Nothing about the encounter suggested deception. Yet the protected credential continued moving through levels of authority far beyond Ryan's experience. Several miles away, 3 Air Force security forces sport utility vehicles exited Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in a controlled convoy. Their emergency lights remained off because there was no emergency requiring speed. Inside the lead vehicle, a security forces major quietly reviewed the verification report transmitted from higher headquarters. The protected identity had already been confirmed through official channels. The instructions were straightforward. Coordinate professionally with civilian law enforcement. Preserve procedural integrity. Ensure the traveler could continue official duties once verification was complete. No one inside the convoy discussed rank. No one speculated about the roadside encounter. Their responsibility was simply to arrive, verify, and support the established process. Back at the traffic stop, Ryan's mobile computer displayed another secure notification. Coordination complete. Military representatives arriving. Maintain current scene. Await further instruction. He leaned back in his seat and slowly exhaled. Every notification seemed to answer one question while creating another. He looked through the windshield once again. The quiet man inside the gray sedan had not changed his posture from the moment the stop began. His patience no longer looked unusual. It looked intentional. Less than a minute later, 3 dark Air Force security forces vehicles appeared in the distance, moving steadily toward the roadside. Ryan watched them approach, still believing he was about to witness an ordinary verification. He had no idea that within the next few minutes, every assumption he had formed since activating his emergency lights would quietly begin to disappear. The 3 Air Force security forces vehicles rolled onto the shoulder with quiet precision, their movements controlled and deliberate rather than dramatic. No emergency lights flashed. No sirens disturbed the steady flow of traffic entering Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The convoy came to a smooth stop several yards behind Ryan Carter's patrol cruiser, leaving enough room for passing vehicles while maintaining a professional distance from the scene. Ryan stepped out of his cruiser as 4 security forces personnel exited their vehicles. Their uniforms were immaculate, their expressions composed, and every movement reflected years of disciplined training. The senior officer, a major wearing the insignia of the United States Air Force, walked toward Ryan with a calm, respectful demeanor. "Good morning, officer," he said. "I am Major Thomas Reynolds with Air Force Security Forces. We are here regarding your credential verification request." Ryan nodded and retrieved the protected credential holder from his patrol car. "Thank you for responding. Dispatch advised me the verification had been elevated through higher command." "That is correct," Reynolds replied as he accepted the credential. Instead of opening it immediately, He first turned toward the older black man standing quietly beside the gray sedan. The driver had stepped out only after Ryan had given him permission several minutes earlier, and he now stood with his leather briefcase resting comfortably at his side. He neither approached the officers nor attempted to join the conversation. He simply waited. Major Reynolds gave the man a brief, respectful nod before opening the credential holder. Another security forces officer activated a secure handheld verification device, carefully comparing the credential with encrypted information transmitted through a protected military network. Ryan watched silently. The entire process unfolded without unnecessary conversation. After several moments, the handheld device displayed its confirmation. The second officer looked toward Major Reynolds and gave a single affirmative nod. "Verification complete, sir." Reynolds closed the credential holder and took one measured step toward the waiting traveler. He came to attention with practiced precision and rendered a formal salute. "Good morning, General Brooks," he said respectfully. "Thank you for your patience, sir. Your identity has been fully verified." For a brief moment, the sounds of passing traffic seemed to disappear from Ryan's awareness. "General." The single word echoed through his thoughts with far greater force than any raised voice ever could. The quiet man he had viewed as an ordinary civilian traveling to the installation was not simply another visitor. Standing before him was General David Brooks, a senior officer in the United States Air Force whose protected credential had quietly activated an entire chain of command reaching far beyond the local installation. General Brooks returned the salute with calm professionalism before accepting the credential holder. "Thank you, Major." His voice remained exactly as steady as it had been from the beginning of the traffic stop. He did not mention his rank. He did not remind anyone how long the verification had taken. He simply placed the credential inside his suit jacket and looked toward Ryan with the same composed expression he had maintained since their first conversation. Ryan felt the weight of every assumption he had formed only minutes earlier. Throughout the encounter, General Brooks had never attempted to influence the situation by revealing his position. He had repeatedly requested only one thing: verify the credential through the proper channels. The process had done the rest. Major Reynolds turned back toward Ryan. "Officer Carter, thank you for maintaining the scene while verification was completed. The protected credential required confirmation through higher department of the Air Force Authority before identifying information could be released." Ryan nodded slowly, still processing everything that had unfolded. "I understand." Reynolds continued in the same professional tone. General Brooks followed the established procedures exactly as expected. The verification is now complete, and further coordination will continue through the appropriate chain of command. Ryan looked once more toward General Brooks. For the first time that morning, he realized that the most powerful person standing on that quiet Kentucky roadside had never needed to announce his authority because the truth had arrived on its own, carried not by rank or reputation, but by patience, professionalism, and a system built to let facts speak before assumptions ever could. For several quiet moments, no one spoke. Officer Ryan Carter remained beside his patrol cruiser, looking at General David Brooks with a completely different understanding than the one he had carried only minutes earlier. The roadside had not changed. Cars still entered Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at a steady pace. A light breeze still carried the distant sound of aircraft preparing for another day of training and operations. Yet everything felt different because the facts had finally caught up with the assumptions. Major Thomas Reynolds respectfully handed the protected credential holder back to General Brooks with both hands. "Your credential, sir." General Brooks accepted it with a courteous nod before placing it inside his suit jacket. "Thank you, Major." There was no celebration. There was no dramatic speech. There was no attempt to embarrass anyone standing nearby. The quiet dignity that had defined General Brooks from the beginning never changed. Ryan took a slow breath before walking forward. "General Brooks," he said sincerely, "I appreciate your patience throughout this entire process." General Brooks looked at him with a calm expression that revealed neither satisfaction nor resentment. Patience becomes easier when people allow procedures to do their job. Ryan nodded. "I realize now that I formed conclusions before I had all the facts." The general answered gently, Every profession asks people to make decisions quickly. The challenge is remembering that quick decisions should still leave room for the truth. Ryan lowered his eyes for a brief moment before looking back up. I should have focused more on verification than on my first impression. General Brooks offered a small, understanding smile. Verification protects everyone involved. It protects the public. It protects officers. It protects the integrity of every institution represented here today. Around them, the members of Air Force security forces quietly completed the remaining administrative steps. One officer finalized the secure verification record while another confirmed through a portable radio that the credential had been returned and the coordination had concluded successfully. Every movement reflected professionalism rather than urgency. Nothing about the scene resembled a confrontation. It resembled experienced public servants ensuring that every responsibility had been completed correctly. Major Reynolds then received a brief transmission through his radio earpiece. After acknowledging the message, he turned toward Ryan. Officer Carter, your patrol captain has been informed that the verification has been completed successfully. The Department of the Air Force has requested that all documentation associated with this contact be preserved as part of the official record. Ryan answered immediately. Understood. Reynolds continued. Your body camera recording, dashboard camera footage, dispatch communications, and incident report will remain unchanged. Accurate documentation benefits every agency involved. Ryan agreed without hesitation. He now understood why every camera, every radio transmission, and every written note mattered. They preserved facts that no memory could ever improve or distort. General Brooks adjusted the handle of his leather briefcase before looking toward the entrance of the installation, where another group of Air Force personnel continued reporting for duty. Major, he said quietly, I believe we all have responsibilities waiting for us. Yes, sir, Reynolds replied respectfully. As General Brooks prepared to continue toward the base, Ryan found himself thinking about everything that had happened since the moment he activated his emergency lights. The man standing before him had possessed one of the highest levels of authority in the United States Air Force, yet he had never once relied on rank to influence the encounter. He had trusted the system instead of demanding exceptions. He had trusted the facts instead of emotions. Most importantly, he had treated every person on that roadside with the same respect he expected in return. Watching General Brooks walk calmly toward the waiting security forces vehicle, Ryan realized that genuine leadership rarely announces itself. It reveals itself quietly through patience, discipline, humility, and the confidence to let truth arrive in its own time. Later that afternoon, after the morning traffic had faded into memory, Officer Ryan Carter arrived at his department headquarters carrying the incident file that had grown far more significant than he could have imagined when the day began. Instead of completing a routine traffic report, he entered a conference room where his patrol captain, a representative from the department's Professional Standards Division, and a liaison officer from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base were already waiting. The atmosphere remained calm and professional. No one raised their voice. No one approached the meeting with accusations. The purpose was simple: review the documented facts, preserve procedural integrity, and ensure that every agency involved understood exactly how the encounter had unfolded. A large display screen illuminated the room as the first recording began. Ryan watched his own body camera footage from the moment he activated his emergency lights until the final verification had been completed. Every greeting, every question, and every response appeared exactly as they had occurred. The recording then shifted to the dashboard camera inside his patrol cruiser, showing the encounter from a wider perspective while synchronized dispatch recordings played beside the video. Timestamps matched every transmission, every verification request, and every notification received from the Department of the Air Force. The Professional Standards Supervisor paused the recording shortly after General David Brooks had presented the protected credential. Officer Carter, he asked calmly, what was your initial assessment during this portion of the stop? Ryan looked at the screen before answering honestly. I believed I understood the situation before the verification process was complete. The supervisor nodded without criticism. What changed? Ryan answered without hesitation. The facts. The room remained quiet for several seconds. The Air Force liaison officer then advanced the recording to the moment when General Brooks politely requested that the credential be verified through the appropriate channels. The liaison looked around the room before speaking. Notice that General Brooks never requested special treatment. He never identified himself by rank. He relied entirely on established procedures to confirm his identity. Ryan watched the footage again. Seeing the encounter from an outside perspective revealed details he had overlooked while standing on the roadside. General Brooks had remained calm during every delay. He had answered every question respectfully. He had never attempted to influence the outcome through personal authority. The process itself had revealed everything that needed to be known. The review continued with synchronized footage showing the arrival of Air Force security forces, the protected verification, and the respectful confirmation of General Brooks' identity. Every camera, every radio transmission, and every written record supported the same sequence of events. Nothing depended upon memory. Nothing depended upon opinion. The facts remained consistent from beginning to end. Before concluding the meeting, Ryan's patrol captain closed the incident file and addressed everyone present. Professional accountability is not about assigning blame. It is about ensuring that procedures remain strong, enough to earn public trust. Accurate documentation protects officers, military personnel, and the communities we serve. Ryan quietly nodded. He understood those words differently than he would have only a few hours earlier. As the meeting concluded, the Air Force liaison gathered the remaining documentation and prepared to return to the installation. Before leaving, he looked toward Ryan and offered one final observation. General Brooks asked that no special recognition come from today's incident. His only request was that the process continue to work exactly as it was designed. Ryan watched the liaison leave the room before looking down once more at the completed case file resting on the conference table. Every page represented a lesson that could never have been learned through assumptions alone. Long after the recordings were archived and the reports were filed, the most important evidence from that morning would remain unchanged. Patience had allowed the truth to arrive, and the truth had quietly corrected every mistaken impression without requiring anyone to raise their voice. Several months passed, and the quiet morning outside Wright-Patterson Air Force Base slowly became another archived case inside the department's record system, but it never disappeared from Officer Ryan Carter's memory. The official review had concluded with recommendations centered on procedural judgment, objective verification, and the importance of allowing evidence to guide decisions before assumptions took their place. Ryan accepted every recommendation without hesitation because he understood that professional growth did not begin when someone proved they were right. It began when someone was willing to learn after discovering they had been wrong. As the seasons changed across Kentucky, Ryan noticed his own approach to every traffic stop evolving. He still performed his duties with confidence, but confidence was now balanced by patience. He asked more questions before reaching conclusions. He relied more heavily on documented facts than personal impressions. Every encounter became a reminder that appearances could never reveal the full story behind a person's responsibilities, sacrifices, or service. General David Brooks continued carrying out his duties with the same quiet professionalism that had defined every moment of their roadside encounter. The incident was never mentioned during official Air Force events or public ceremonies. He never used it to seek recognition, personal attention, or influence. To him, the outcome had never been about rank. It had been about allowing established procedures to function exactly as they were intended. Months later, a regional public safety conference brought together local law enforcement leaders, Air Force officials, emergency responders, and community representatives to strengthen cooperation between civilian and military agencies. Ryan attended as part of his department's delegation. As the afternoon session ended, he noticed General Brooks speaking with several young Air Force officers near the entrance to the conference hall. After a brief moment of hesitation, Ryan walked across the room and respectfully approached him. "General Brooks," he said, "I wanted to thank you for the lesson you taught me that morning." General Brooks smiled warmly. "I do not remember teaching a lesson, officer." Ryan answered honestly. "You did not teach it with words. You taught it by trusting the process instead of your position. The general considered that response before extending his hand. Ryan accepted the handshake with genuine respect. Public trust, General Brooks said calmly, is built every time professionals choose facts over assumptions. That responsibility belongs to all of us, regardless of the uniform we wear. Ryan nodded. I will remember that for the rest of my career. Around them, conversations continued as police officers, military personnel, firefighters, and civic leaders exchanged ideas about serving their communities. None of them knew the history shared between the two men standing quietly near the doorway. There were no television cameras waiting outside, no reporters asking questions, no audience applauding the moment. There was simply mutual respect earned through honesty, accountability, and the willingness to grow. As Ryan watched General Brooks greet another group of young service members with the same humility he had shown on the roadside, one truth became impossible to ignore. The highest rank at the scene had never been the greatest source of authority. Character had. Long after every report had been filed, every recording archived, and every official review completed, the memory that remained strongest was not the flashing patrol lights or the phone call that reached the Pentagon. It was the quiet example of a man who never needed to announce his importance because integrity spoke before his title ever could. In the end, uniforms may represent responsibility, but only fairness earns lasting respect, and justice finds its greatest strength when every person is judged by verified truth instead of first impressions.